Story time. That time I bought a semi-truck. So you might wonder, why make this video now? I mean, I've been in trucking now for almost 3 years. In fact of the matter is, this is just a question it's probably my most common question on here. People want to know about, like, you know, how did I buy the truck? When did I buy the truck? All that kind of stuff like that. So rather than typing out these long, you know, responses to people, I just figure I'm going to make a video about it and share the process with you. Maybe you can identify with something in here. Maybe, you know, maybe you leave here with something new if you're considering jumping into trucking. But to understand this story, you have to go back to when I was looking at purchasing the truck, which was back in 2021. Now, the first thing I'll say about there is equipment rates were outrageous. I mean, you know, if you're judging me by the today's standard, the 2024, you're going to leave here. I mean, I'm going to give you cause to kind of make some fun of me. You're going to be sitting there thinking like, man, you really overpaid for the truck. The fact of the matter is, back in 2021, the price of these trucks, price of all equipment everywhere was going real crazy. I mean, it was like, you know, you'd sit on a truck for like a month, and during that month, the truck would go up by like $10,000. And that's kind of like the first thing I want you to leave here knowing. There's no, unlike cars, there's no Kelley Blue Book on like commercial equipment. It is strictly based on supply and demand. So like, at the time, obviously, like, rates were going crazy. Everybody, myself included, was like, man, I'm going to jump into trucking. Well, unfortunately, everybody had the same idea, and the price of equipment just went up. And you can kind of see the reverse of that right now. Like, rates are starting to cool down. Things are starting to slow down. I could probably get the same truck today, exact same truck, for probably a third to maybe a quarter of what I paid for it. So I go up to practically every truck dealer up in Fontana. It was like the closest little nexus to my house as far as like where they sold trucks at. And I go in there and I just represented myself at first exactly how I was. I'm like, man, I'm new CDL, I'm new authority, I'm looking to get a truck. There's two parts of the story that I kind of feel bragging when I say this, but they're pertinent to this story. I walked into each of these with pretty good credit and more money in the bank than I was asking to borrow. And all of these people, as soon as they saw me coming, they're like, oh, new authority? Oh, well, you know, you're an unknown. You know, we're going to have to give you a 30% auto loan. It was like, yeah, but what about my credit? I mean, you know, like, my credit's got to account for something. I mean, it should prove that I don't make bad financial decisions. And they're just like, oh, no, trucking's different. Trucking's different. And the first couple of dealerships that told me this, I was kind of like, these guys are crazy. I mean, these guys are just, they think I'm going to pay 30% on like a $80,000 truck loan. You're out of your mind. And, you know, and then as the day progressed, I actually made 2 days out of it. As I went to more and more, I kind of started changing up my story. I kind of started feeding off of how these people were, you know, how they come at you. And it's like, you know, rather than being like, which I knew they'd find out eventually, but rather than being like the new guy, new authority, everything like that, I kind of started going in and kind of like misrepresenting myself a little bit to see what it could get me. And it's like, yeah, I'm thinking about adding a truck to the fleet, you know, all this kind of stuff, kind of like talking their lingo. I kind of picked up on it quick. And the best interest rate I was quoted, kind of fronting this lie a little bit. I mean, some of them were willing to come down to 20%, which was still absurd. And, you know, I was like, finally, I was sitting down with some of these finance guys, and I went up there with like my credit report, and I could pull up on my phone what my bank balance was. And it's like, you know, I tried to reason with them. I'm like, you know, you are like, have you ever heard the term, like, you can skin a sheep many times, or you can shear a sheep many times but kill it only once? It's like, wouldn't you guys rather give me like a reasonable interest rate and make a little money off of me, as opposed to, you know, if I pay cash for this truck, which I was in the position to do, you're going to make no money off of me. And they drew like a hard line with me. This wasn't just like 1 or 2 dealerships. This was all of them. They were like, because you're new authority, we kind of have the right to charge you this crazy interest rate, and that's what we're going to do. So I didn't stay butthurt on that too long. You know, I was like, okay, well, I mean, if you're kind of forcing my decision, I mean, you start doing the math on like a 30% auto loan on $80,000, the cost of that loan cost you almost as much as the principal you were trying to borrow in the first place. I think the payback on that was like 72 grand. And it's like, there's no way I'm going to pay you $72,000 to borrow 80. That just doesn't, like, I was in mid 40s at that point in my life. It's like my credit report should account for nothing, and it just didn't with me. They're just like, nope, we don't, trucking's a different ball of wax altogether. And it was like, fine. So I made the decision. I did want to finance it. I was trying to finance it for like tax purposes, but you know, with a 20% optimal interest loan that they were interest on that loan they were offering me, it was like, nope, never mind. I kind of made the decision to just pay cash for the truck. So that my next decision kind of came down to like, did I want to purchase from one of these dealers? And I'll fully admit my bias. I was a little bit off put by them, just because it's like, you know, I've never in any business transaction. I mean, I bought a house, I bought cars, I bought all sorts of stuff in my life, and it's like I've never had this level of skepticism towards me with any sort of financial purchase in my life. And when they started coming at me like that, it was like I kind of didn't want to do business with them. If I found the right truck, I would have. But another thing that these guys all told me, and that, you know, I'm not going to say names because I don't want to get sued for libel on YouTube, but, you know, like one thing that every single one of these places would tell me is they'd be like, oh, well, yeah, you know, the truck has like 500,000 miles on it. It's had like 2-3 owners, and we have the full work history on the truck. I didn't believe that. I still don't believe that. I mean, you know, like, since I've been in possession of this truck, I've taken excellent care of it. If I were to sell it to you, I could walk you through repairs, oil changes, tire purchases, everything. I mean, with video evidence, as far as, you know, like stuff I've done. But, you know, to have everybody for them to tell me that, like, they have the full work history, service history on a vehicle in their possession that's had 3 prior owners, I just didn't believe that. And so I started kind of expanding my search out, and I opted to go with Penske Used Truck Sales. Now, I know you can make the argument of like, well, Penske probably, you know, rented it to somebody who drove it like absolute crap. And you're 100% right. But when Penske told me that they had the full work history of the truck, because they were the original owner of the truck, that was valuable to me. And that was something that I did value having, of knowing like the full history of the truck. And that's why I opted to go through like Penske Used Truck Sales. I'm not sponsored by Penske. Penske doesn't even know I exist, other than I bought this truck from them. I'm not, you know, I'm just letting you know my side of things, because, you know, I know you can go online and you can read like customer reviews of anything, and you're going to find enough people who are going to be like, I hate them, I never do business with them. My interaction with Penske, buying this truck through them, was very positive, and I feel like I've been very fortunate with this truck since I've taken ownership of it. So buy the truck. Now, the next big decision I had to come across, and one that you may face, was aftermarket warranty. Obviously, this truck was old enough and had enough miles on it to where I didn't qualify for a manufacturer's warranty. I want to be clear. I'm not talking about a manufacturer's warranty. I'm talking about like an aftermarket warranty. I'm not going to say any of these company names, same liable reasons as before. But, you know, as a relatively newbie getting into trucking, I liked the idea of like, oh, I have a warranty that'll cover this for me if something goes wrong. Because, I mean, let's be realistic. Trucking wasn't in my skill set 3 years ago, and it was like, you know, that coverage kind of seemed like it would be like beneficial, especially to somebody like me. What I found out on that was, and, you know, if you've had a positive interaction with one of these companies, by all means, feel free to prove me wrong. I'm not going to take it personally. I mean, if you've had a wonderful relationship with one of these companies, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. But when I started, so I'm now in possession of the truck. You've got like or at the time you had like a 30-day window to start one of these warranties. And so I start calling them up and just asking basic questions, you know, like, hey, I've bought this truck, what would it cost? You know, that type of stuff like that. And, you know, they send you out like a brochure or an email, and in big, bold, you know, page 1 of the contract, it's like, we cover everything. You don't have to worry about us. Keep the truck moving, all this kind of stuff. But then you get to like page 17, page 18 of the contract, and it's like they start talking about like, if the truck has something come up with it that was a pre-existing condition, we won't cover that. And so like I immediately, I mean, that's like a red flag to me. I'm going through this thing with like a highlighter. And I call them up. I'm like, so, you know, how do I get a copy of the, you know, a list of like pre-existing conditions? I come from a work environment where we deal with pre-existing conditions a lot. Like, I want to know, like, what does this mean? And the guy, he's like, kind of like brushes me off. Like, oh yeah, we get a list from the Penske, basically, like any problem the truck's had and everything like that. And then those are things that are excluded from our coverage. And it's like, okay, well, can I get a copy of that list too then? Because I'm thinking I have that with a full work history and everything, but it's like a different list. And he's like, I have to check with my manager. And it's like, I'm kind of like, at this point, like bells and whistles are going off in my mind. And it's like, wait, you're telling me that there's a list that you can come to me later and say, we're going to deny you because of this, but we're not going to give you the list. And so the guy ends up, you know, we ended the call. He calls me back. He's like, you know, I talked it over with my manager. We've never had a customer ask for this before. And it's like, well, are you kidding? Like, you're telling me there's a make-believe list of stuff that I'm going to pay you to cover that you're going to exclude from coverage, and you're not willing to give me the list? I mean, it's like, of course we were going to start. If I'm going to do business with you, of course we're going to start with that same list just to keep both sides honest. And, you know, it was just like that fighting for that list was, that was very off-putting to me. In the end, I opted to not do any aftermarket warranty, anything like that. And I'll tell you one thing I've learned along the way these last 3 years. I've known two people, regrettably, and this is, you know, if you're not into trucking yet, you're thinking about it, and you're kind of dead set on getting one of these things, keep this in mind. I've known two people, unfortunately, who have gone out of business because they had warranty coverage, and what happened to their equipment was covered. But here's the thing, and this is an important question to ask. How soon, if something is covered on this truck and it's covered, how soon are you going to relinquish payment so that I can go get this repair done? Because in both cases, the warranty place stepped in and said, hey, good news, we'll cover it. Yeah, we'll pay you in 6 weeks. Well, think about that. The shop's not going to do the truck until they get paid for it. Can you afford to take 6 weeks off? Can you afford to park this truck somewhere for 6 weeks while the payment's coming through? So, I mean, I know from these aftermarket warranty places, they'd be like, well, we covered it. Yeah, that's fine, but 6 weeks later does me no good. So a very important question to ask. It kind of is once I heard from, at separate times, but when I heard from both people say like, hey, good news. I mean, it's like the air being let out of their balloon was like, you know, they're like, oh, I'm so happy it's covered. And then you talk to them a couple days later and it's like, I'm not getting the payment for 6 weeks. It's like, I'm going to have to go out of business. And it just, so I opted to not do it. I'm out here raw dogging the trucking industry, just thinking, you know, if it, like, basically I have to keep money set aside to where if something goes wrong with this truck, I can pay for it and I can take care of it. But at least if something goes wrong, I control when that payment happens. Like if I've got money to cover it, hopefully I do, I go take care of it, pay the place, and truck's back on the road 7 days tops, you know. But, you know, if you're sitting there waiting for one of these companies to send you out a payment 6 weeks later, the warranty's just not worth the paper it's printed on, in my opinion. So did I overpay for my truck? I mean, yeah, if you're judging me by the 2024 standard, hell yes, I did. I mean, sit back, have a good laugh at my expense. I mean, I paid $80,000 for a truck that I have no doubt I could get today for $25,000. And I share this story. I open up this vulnerability of myself of saying like, hey, look, I overpaid. I know I did. The thing is, and I don't want to be cocky in saying this, but I made it work. And that's what you have to do. You have to, I mean, you know, like right now, if you buy a truck today, yeah, rates may not be that great, but you've got to find a way to make it work. And, you know, so, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I missed out on having to do from when I bought my truck. I mean, you know, I have done a lot of work with Amazon in the past. Kind of questionable as far as, you know, what's going on today, but it's like, you know, when I started, they didn't have the 180-day thing. You could just, I think it was like 30 days. So, I mean, yes, I overpaid, but there was a benefit, and all that's just noise. The thing is, I made it work. I'm here now, getting ready to go into my 3rd year, and everything's good. So just know that. I mean, you know, I guess the point of this story is there's never a perfect time to jump into trucking. I mean, you can sit there and say like, I'm going to wait till the rates come back up. Great. Well, you know, equipment's probably going to be double, triple. You know, I mean, I remember back in 2021 paying attention to trucks and seeing like 2-3 weeks go by and seeing the price jump up by like $10,000 and calling and being like, hey, this VIN number I called on before, did it go up this much? Oh yeah, it did. So there's never a perfect time to jump into trucking, as long as you have the mindset of like, no matter what, whatever it takes, I'm going to make it work. I think you'll make it work. But as always, I hope this video serves you well. Appreciate you for watching. Take care.